You've been told that love is something you find, something you chase, something you earn through sacrifice and compromise. But what if the greatest lie you've been sold is that love exists outside of you? The desperate search, the endless swiping, the compromising of your essence to fit what another desires. This relentless hunt for connection has left you hollow, exhausted, a beggar at the door of affection. You wait for text messages like verdicts. You interpret silences like a priest interprets omens. You have turned yourself into a hungry ghost, perpetually, unfilled no matter how many temporary connections you consume. This is not love. This is desperation dressed in romantic clothing. This is the abyss calling to the abyss, empty seeking empty, wound seeking wound. You run from silence because it reveals the emptiness you've been carrying. You fill your days with noise, with dating apps and social validation, terrified of what you might discover in the quiet hours. That perhaps there is nothing to find because you have yet to build anything within. Look at how you fragment yourself into pieces for the consumption of others. Look at how you meticulously curate your image, cropping out everything authentic and inconvenient. Look at how you exchange your dignity for momentary attention, how you trade your essence for the currency of desire. Your exhaustion is not from looking. It is from pretending. It is from the endless performance of being lovable instead of the radical practice of being real. The love you've been chasing is a mirage. It evaporates the moment you reach its shores. It leaves you more parched than before, more desperate than before, more disconnected than before. The truth is stark. The love you seek has never been something to find. It has always been something to become. Since childhood, you were conditioned to believe that completion comes from outside, that you are somehow incomplete until another completes you, that you are a half seeking its other half. Society carved this belief into your bones before you could question it. Every fairy tale ended with two becoming one. Every song celebrated the salvation that comes from another's embrace. Every movie glorified the moment when emptiness is finally filled by the perfect other. And so you learned to perform, to hide your shadows, to become whatever would be desired. You learned to shape yourself like water filling any vessel that might hold you, twisting your nature to fit expectations that were never yours. You called this virtue, this self-denial. You called it compromise, you called it maturity. But it was fear dressed as wisdom. It was abandonment of self masked as connection to another. And when love failed, as it inevitably would, you blamed yourself for not being enough, for not giving enough, for not transforming enough. You never questioned the foundation itself, that love requires you to become less so that connection can become more. Your parents modeled this for you in subtle and explicit ways. Perhaps they stayed in dead connections for appearance. Perhaps they taught you that love is sacrifice, is suffering, is self-erasure. Perhaps they showed you that to be worthy of affection, you must first make yourself small. You learned from religions that taught self-denial as the path to virtue, from cultural narratives that romanticized jealousy as devotion, from economic systems that commodified relationships into transactions, from social structures that defined your worth through your attachments rather than your authenticity. You built an identity around being lovable rather than being true, around being desired rather than being respected, around being needed rather than being witnessed. The proof is in the patterns, in how you enter relationships from lack rather than fullness, in how you lose yourself in others, dissolving your boundaries like salt in water, in how you measure your worth by who wants you rather than who you've become. The evidence is in your exhaustion, in the parts of yourself you've exiled to seem more appealing, in the truths you've swallowed to maintain fragile connections, in the dreams you've abandoned to remain in relationships that were coffins disguised as shelters. This is not love. This is the old bargain of sacrifice, the ancient transaction of self-betrayal for momentary belonging. This is the currency of fear masquerading as the language of devotion. What you're experiencing is not the failure to find love, but the inevitable consequence of seeking wholeness where it cannot exist. This is what Nietzsche called the spirit of gravity, the belief that meaning comes from what weighs us down, what we must carry, what we must earn through suffering. True love is not transactional. It is not the marketplace of affection where worth is measured in what you provide versus what you receive. It is not the careful accounting of emotional debts and credits. The philosopher Heidegger spoke of authenticity, the courage to exist as you truly are, rather than as what they expect you to be. And here lies the paradox. Only when you cease trying to be lovable do you become capable of authentic love. Love is not found in the desperate reaching outward, but in the radical acceptance inward. Not in the frantic motion of seeking, but in the stillness of being. Not in the ceaseless acquisition of connection, but in the cultivation of presence. Consider the wisdom of the Stoics, that peace comes not from controlling the external world, but from mastering your internal responses. That freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the refinement of desires. That strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in transforming your relationship to it. The Eastern traditions have long understood this. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, not the attachment to others, but the attachment to the idea that others can complete you. The Tao speaks of Wu Wei, the paradoxical action of non-action, where power comes not from forcing but from flowing. Where love arises not from grasping but from allowing. Even quantum physics reveals this truth, that observation affects what is observed, that the perceiver and the perceived are not separate entities but aspects of a single phenomenon, that what appears as emptiness is actually a field of infinite potential. Your inner peace, your capacity to rest within yourself without constant external validation, is not incidental to love but fundamental to it. Not a luxury, but a necessity. Not the result of finding the right person, but the prerequisite for connecting with anyone authentically. This is why all your strategies of acquisition have failed. Why all your performances of desirability have left you empty. Why all your compromises have resulted in resentment rather than fulfillment. You've been playing a game designed to be lost, searching outside for what can only be cultivated within. This is not spiritual bypass. This is not toxic positivity. This is the ancient, difficult truth that the cup must be empty before it can be filled. That silence must precede music. That solitude must precede communion. That you must become your own sanctuary before you can truly meet another. Imagine love not as something you hunt, but as something you emanate. Not as a treasure to discover, but as a state you cultivate. Not as a salvation from outside, but as a renaissance from within. This is love that flows from fullness, not from lack. This is love that gives because it overflows, like a spring that cannot help but release its waters, like the sun that cannot help but radiate its light. When you are at peace with yourself, when you have befriended your shadows, embraced your contradictions, accepted your incompleteness, you no longer approach others as a solution to your problem of existence. You approach them as a celebration of their existence. This love does not grasp, it does not demand, it does not keep score. It recognizes the other not as a missing piece but as a sovereign universe worthy of exploration. It does not say, complete me, but rather, I see you, and you are magnificent in your wholeness. Your inner peace becomes the foundation from which genuine connection arises. Not connection born from fear of being alone, but connection born from the courage to be fully present. Not love that diminishes your essence, but love that amplifies it. This is the love that remains when all the projections dissolve, when all the expectations evaporate, when all the demands release their grip. This is the love that exists in the spaces between your thoughts, in the moments when you forget to perform and simply allow yourself to be. It begins with the radical practice of self-acceptance, not the saccharine self-esteem of toxic positivity, but the fierce embrace of all you are. Your brilliance and your pettiness, your generosity and your selfishness, your courage and your cowardice, all the contradictory fragments that make you gloriously human. This is the alchemy that transmutes base fear into golden presence, the crucible in which your anxious striving melts into peaceful being, the metamorphosis from hungry ghost to abundant source. You become a sanctuary rather than a beggar, a lighthouse rather than a shipwreck, a garden rather than a desert. You no longer approach connection with the question, "What can you give me?" but with the offering, "What can we create together?" This love is not passive. It does not merely wait. It actively cultivates the soil of your being so that connection, when it arrives, has somewhere fertile to root. It tends the garden of your mind, pulling the weeds of self-judgment and planting the seeds of compassionate presence. This revolutionary stance changes everything. Your relationships transform from transactions to collaborations. Your attractions evolve from desperate need to authentic resonance. Your boundaries shift from walls of protection to membranes of discernment. This is revolutionary. To love not because you need to, but because you cannot help it. To love not from the desert of your emptiness, but from the garden of your abundance. To love not to escape yourself, but because you have finally, fully inhabited yourself. Yet even this enlightened love must know its seasons, must understand the rhythm of approach and retreat, must honor the silence between notes that makes the music possible. There is wisdom in withdrawal, in the courage to be alone with yourself again, in letting connections breathe rather than clutching them until they suffocate. The mature heart knows when to advance and when to recede, like the tide that neither abandons the shore nor drowns it. All things flow. All connections transform. The love that cannot tolerate change is not love, but possession. The connection that cannot endure separation is not connection, but dependency. Your inner peace must be greater than your attachments, must be deeper than your desires, must be more fundamental than your fear of loss. For only when you can lose everything can you truly give anything. This is the paradox at the heart of enlightened love. That the capacity to let go is what makes holding on meaningful. That the willingness to end is what makes each moment precious. That the acceptance of impermanence is what gives presence its power. Consider the cherry blossoms, revered not despite their brevity but because of it. Their beauty intensified by their transience, their significance magnified by their swift disappearance. They do not cling to the branch. They surrender to the wind, completing their purpose in the very act of release. This is the mature love that understands that all forms must dissolve, that all connections must evolve or conclude, that nothing that can be grasped can be eternal. The love that knows that what matters is not duration, but depth, not permanence, but presence, not security, but sincerity. Your capacity for silence, for comfortable solitude, is the measure of your capacity for authentic connection. Your comfort with endings is the prerequisite for meaningful beginnings. Your acceptance of loss is the foundation for genuine appreciation. The immature heart demands guarantees, requires constant reassurance, needs the other to be a static, unchanging presence. The mature heart embraces uncertainty, welcomes evolution, understands that true security comes not from controlling the uncontrollable, but from deepening your capacity to remain present regardless of circumstance. This is the death that precedes rebirth, the exhale that makes the next inhale possible, the winter that ensures the spring's arrival. Your capacity to let go is the measure of your capacity to truly love. In the silence of self-communion, you discover that what you thought was emptiness was actually potential. What you feared as loneliness was actually sovereignty. What terrified you as abandonment was actually freedom. The gaps between connections are not failures but opportunities for integration. The periods of solitude are not punishments but invitations to deeper presence. The endings are not defeats but completions, necessary conclusions that create space for what wants to emerge. This mature love doesn't frantically fill every silence with noise, doesn't compulsively close every gap with activity, doesn't immediately replace every departed connection with a new one. It honors the fallow periods as essential to fertility, respects the quiet as fundamental to clarity, recognizes solitude as crucial to authentic togetherness. True inner peace is not the absence of storms but the I within them, not the elimination of longing but the transcendence of need. Not the end of desire, but its maturation into something that enhances rather than diminishes. Write in the comments, "My peace creates my love." Make this your mantra for 7 days. Notice how your interactions change when you approach them from fullness rather than from hunger. The love you're seeking has always been a reflection of your inner peace, not something to find but something to become, not something to earn but something to allow, not something to grasp but something to embody. Continue exploring this truth. Let it unsettle you. Let it challenge you. Let it transform how you move through the world of connections. Stop the frantic search for what can only emerge through cultivation. End the desperate pursuit of what already exists within you, waiting to be recognized. Cease the exhausting performance of being lovable and embrace the liberating practice of being authentic. This practice will feel like death at first. The death of familiar patterns. The death of comfortable illusions. The death of the identity you've built around seeking validation from others. There will be resistance, there will be doubt, there will be the temptation to return to the old ways of performing and pursuing. But through this death comes a resurrection more profound than you can imagine. Through this surrender comes a power more fundamental than you've known. Through this release comes a connection more authentic than you've experienced. Begin with small acts of radical authenticity, moments where you choose truth over approval, where you honor your boundaries instead of abandoning them for acceptance, where you speak from your center rather than from your fear. Practice the art of peaceful solitude, not the solitude of isolation or avoidance, but the solitude of self-communion, of becoming intimate with your own mind, of befriending your own heart, of witnessing your own experience without constant external reference. Cultivate the capacity to rest in unfilled space, to breathe in unresolved questions, to exist in unfinished stories. This capacity to be at peace with incompletion is the foundation of all authentic connection. Remember that this journey is not linear, that you will oscillate between old patterns and new awareness, between anxious seeking and peaceful being, between desperate grasping and generous offering. This oscillation is not failure, but part of the integration process. Not regression, but refinement. The world won't immediately understand this transformation. Many will misinterpret your peace as indifference, your authenticity as selfishness, your boundaries as coldness. This is the tax on evolution, to be temporarily misunderstood as you outgrow old paradigms. But those who resonate with your new frequency will find you. Those who are ready for authentic connection will recognize you. Those who have done their own inner work will celebrate you. The connections that emerge from this foundation will possess a depth and resilience impossible in relationships, built on mutual need and reciprocal fear. For when you finally understand that love is not a destination, but a way of traveling, not an achievement but a practice, not a solution but a perspective, then you will have found what cannot be lost. Then you will offer what cannot be depleted. Then you will know what cannot be forgotten. Your peace, your presence, your power to love not from emptiness, but from essence. This is not the end of your search. It is the beginning of your embodiment, and in that embodiment you become not just a seeker of love, but its very source. Not just a hunter of connection, but its wellspring. Not just a beggar at the door of affection, but the temple itself. Return to this wisdom when you forget. When you find yourself slipping into old patterns of desperate seeking. When you feel the familiar anxiety of needing validation from outside. When you catch yourself performing rather than being. Return to the sanctuary of your own presence, to the abundance of your own being, to the fullness that exists prior to all connections and survives all endings. This is your true home, the foundation from which authentic love can finally fully emerge. Your inner peace creates your love. Your love reflects your inner peace. This is the circle of authentic connection, the eternal dance between the silence within and the expression without, between the stillness of being and the joy of relating, between the sovereignty of selfhood and the communion of togetherness. This is your birthright. This is your path. This is your truth. Claim it now.